Hello, class. Welcome back. Hope you guys had an awesome weekend. And I just want to welcome you guys back and hope you guys are doing well. I do want to make sure we're all on the same page. Literally, 452 is where I'm going to begin, and we're going to finish World War One. Actually, we really finished the war technically, but we haven't put a cap in it on it. So we're going to pursue this peace, or I say we. The world is trying to pursue this peace at this time to say no more war. This was nasty. This was gross. This was hard. This was not what we were expecting. And it really leaves a bitter taste in people's mouth. So let's see how the world comes up with a way to promote this peace. And it comes, of course, in Paris. Now, the war ends. I did want to mention a story I don't think I mentioned on the last video where there was this one German in the hospital. He got injured in the war. In fact, what happened was a really bad accident. He was in the trenches. He was running across no man's land. He falls into a foxhole or one of the holes, this crater really, and there was still some poison gas left inside, or sitting at the bottom. And whenever he falls in, he's got a full pack on. He falls head first. He can't get out of it. And he is gasping for his last breath. His friend pulls him out and pulls him to fresh air. And he survives. The soldier survives. And he's taken back to the camp, taken back to the hospital. And there he's recuperating, trying to get back. His voice never really recovers. But while he's in the hospital, he hears that Germany surrenders. And he is upset. This is the second time that he cries. This is Adolf Hitler. First time he cried was when his mother passed away. The second time is when he hears Germany doing this. And we're going to see why he cries because of what Germany signs up for. And in fact, even the German officials aren't very happy with what happens. But Adolf Hitler doesn't really know the German rulers or the officials don't really have much they can do. And we're going to see why. It all comes about at the Paris Peace Conference. Now, the war ends in 1918. Here it is, the beginning of the year, 1919. And these delegates meet in France, in Paris. Now, notice who the dominant leaders are. Wilson, Clemenceau, George, and Orlando. Notice US, France, England, and Italy. These are known as the Big Four. In fact, they're pictured in your book on page 453. You can see them. These are going to be the main guys in this conference. Notice who's not there. Russia. Even though they were on the Ally side, Russia's not there. Because these leaders said, you know what, Russia, you got out of the war. You don't need to be at these meetings. Notice who else is not there. Germany. Germany has no say in this conference. You're like, yeah, Germany lost. Yeah, but even in the past wars, we've seen the losing side come to the table, come to the peace table, and work out peace. Well, here all of this is being devised in secret, if you will. So imagine like this fight's going on, right? You got these two people, let's say me and my sibling, and of course my brother. I mean, who else am I gonna fight with? Anyway, so I'm fighting with my brother, right? And of course, I'm winning. I'm always winning. So I beat my brother up, which is not surprising, but he's down on the ground, like he's desperate, he's hurting, and here I am, like forcing him on the ground with my head, or with my hand on his head, and I'm like, okay, you're only allowed to get up if you do this, this, and this, and this. Does my brother have any say in it? No. And I'm eventually gonna be the person to actually let him up. But how does that make me look, right? Get demerits for bullying, essentially. But it's my brother. You can't really bully a sibling. Anyway, we won't get into that. It really looks really bad on these big four because they're really just kind of, I hate to say this, but bullying Germany around, and we're going to see what happens. It says, by the time the Germans signed the armistice and in the war, they did so with the understanding that Wilson's peace program would be in effect, but that is not what Germany's going to get. What is this talking about, Wilson's peace program? It's called the 14 points, and it wasn't just this arbitrary name, like, oh, 14 points sounds really good. It had the list of 14 points of how to bring peace back to the world. And it was good for the most part, but most people didn't like it. When I say most people, in the Big Four, in fact, Clemenceau, I really like his quote on 453. You can see below the picture it says, even God was satisfied with 10 commandments, but Wilson insists on 14. So Clemenceau was kind of this hard guy, and he didn't want anything to do with the 14 points. And the Allies really reject Wilson and kind of not make fun of him, but degrade him to an instance. So Germany is in for a rude awakening because Clemenceau and George are really going to take the leadership. Clemenceau, he's French. How does he feel about Germany? He's mad, right? He wants Germany to pay the debt. They want to pay for what they've done to France. I mean, they caught France off guard, so of course Clemenceau is going to be tough. George is also pretty tough. He's not as tough as Clemenceau, but he is still going to want pretty harsh reprimands on Germany. So we see the big four, Wilson over here that you may recognize. You see George, Clemenceau, and Orlando. Now, let's get to the actual meat of the peace conference. They're going to sign several treaties. In fact, you say 5. But the most important one is going to be the Treaty of Versailles. This is really what we're going to say that kind of draws up the end of World War One. You want to know the Treaty of Versailles. This is between the Allies and Germany. Now, there were other countries involved. That's what the other treaties were. We're going to look at some of those. But this is the main one because Germany was the main fight. So what do we tell Germany? First one is territorial provisions. There are going to be a couple of provisions. You want to know each one. One is territorial, saying you have to give up this land. Notice you have to return land to France and you got to give some to Belgium and Denmark. So Germany is already going to lose some of the land, which means natural resources, which means availability to live, availability to grow crops. So that's going to hurt Germany, just losing land. We see the Poland nation started, which we're going to remember back in World War II, or future to World War II. Next provision is the economic provision, and once you take the land away, it makes it even harder to make economic provisions. But we see that they're going to force Germany to pay reparations, which means they're going to make Germany pay for the war. What does war cost? War is expensive. Yes, it costs human lives, but war is expensive with materials, supplies, I'm talking ammunition, bombs, tanks, building the actual material. You have to pay your soldiers. You got to pay to feed them. It's expensive. And we're not talking a couple thousands. We're talking millions of dollars for each country. So where is France and England going to get their money from? They're going to get it from the United States. The United States is going to give these loans to France and England. Germany was strong enough that they were able to financially help themselves out. I mean, they went to war, so they better be ready for a war. France and England, not necessarily so. They were playing more of a self-defense game. So they needed money to borrow. Well, France and England are like, we're not going to pay for this. Germany did most of this damage. You got to pay for it. So now Germany can't pay for it because one, you took their land away, and two, we're going to see they're also going to take their military away. So how are we supposed to defend ourselves when we only have 100,000 men? Now you may say 100,000 men, that's enough. Yeah, but whenever you're being bullied around by other nations, this is leaving you really weak. Not to mention, you can't militarize your borders. That this Rhine, the Rhineland, you are not allowed to put any military in. So they're leaving Germany very desperate economically, but also militarily. And the last one was probably the most damaging of all. You want to know these 4 points: the territory, the reparations, the economic, the military, and now the guilt. You know those 4. The war guilt says, and it was an actual clause that said, we Germany blame ourselves. We take the entire blame for the war. Now, what's interesting is Germany was willing to say, yeah, it was partially our fault, but not all our fault. Let's remember way back to the beginning of the war. We're talking June 28th, right? We're talking the Archduke Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary, and who killed him? Serbia. So this is really what we say at the beginning of the war, and it wasn't Germany. Now, Germany did have a lot to do with it after, but Germany wasn't going to take full blame for the war. And they actually tell the Allies, listen, we're not going to take full blame for the war. What's this clause? It's like when you're reading through the contract, you find the fine print at the bottom, like, what is this? Germany's like, whoa, we're not going to sign this. And the Allies are like, okay, if you're not going to sign this, then we're going back to the battlefield. And we're going to show you who's boss. So it does kind of sound like the Allies are bullying Germany around, and Germany is forced to sign it, and they do. And this is one thing that Hitler's not going to be happy with, but we see the officials don't really have much say in it. They can't really do very much. So Germany is forced to sign it. They're going to try and refuse it, but they can't. But what the Allies are really doing is creating resentment and anger at the war guilt clause. And we're going to see this plants the seed for World War II. In fact, your book brings it out. I'm sorry, we're on page 455 now, under the war guilt clause. At the very end of that paragraph, you can see where it starts to say, now this war guilt clause and these seeds of resentment, the anger, are going to allow people to listen to Adolf Hitler. Because Hitler's going to come in, like we saw in the video, or no, I'm sorry, that was a different class. Mixing things up. That's why you're going to see Hitler gain Germany under his hand, mainly because he's going to promise all these great things for Germany and to get them back on their feet, and to promise to get back at the Allies for what they did to us after World War I. So really, these are just creating steps for World War II. So quickly looking at the other treaties, these are not as important as the Treaty of Versailles. That's why I spent more time on those. We're just going to mention these because it has to deal with the other countries. Like Austria-Hungary, they're going to sign the Saint-Germain, which is going to recognize, notice, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, and Yugoslavia. It's also going to make them pay for the reparations, limit the size of their army, and agree to not unify with Germany. That last one is important. That way they don't get their strength back. So it sounds very similar to the Treaty of Versailles. The last two I want to mention is interesting because it dismantles the Ottoman Empire, which we have seen since the early 1000s. We're talking like 1300s, and now it's disbanded. So the Ottoman Empire actually goes all the way till the end of World War One, which is quite a while. But now this turns into League of Nations territory, technically, these mandates. But we're not going to spend much time on those. I do want to spend a little bit of time on the League of Nations, which is what Wilson is promoting. He is just convinced of the League of Nations. This was one of his points in the 14 points. This unifying League of Nations to not go to war anymore, but really do war in a room, where we're not going to settle our disputes on a battlefield, we're going to settle them in a room, which sounds good, but it doesn't really actually happen. So it's going to ultimately fail. And it's going to become successful in a little bit, where some things are going to be resolved, but it's really not. And really what's going to make it fail is the United States never joins. So it goes to Congress, and the Senate has to approve it, and the Senate does not approve it. How embarrassing is this for Wilson? He promotes it, he's super excited about it, he's probably one of the biggest promoters of this, and now his own country won't even join this League of Nations. Now, this really sets the seeds for the UN, or the United Nations. Really kind of says, okay, the League didn't work, let's try something else. The United States will go into the United Nations, but not the League of Nations. Never ratifies it. In fact, the U.S. doesn't even ratify the Treaty of Versailles. The United States said, no, this is way too harsh on Germany. We can't do this. U.S. never signs that treaty, and it never signs the League of Nations. But